My name is Rachel Delaney. I'm 31 years old. 8 months ago, I was sitting at the center of a room decorated in soft yellow and white, surrounded by women who loved me, my hands resting on a belly that was 32 weeks along, when my mother stood up from her seat, clinked her champagne flute with a dessert fork, and announced to 47 people that my marriage was over. She didn't ask me first. She didn't warn me. She just stood up and said it. We want to take this moment to let everyone know that Rachel and Daniel have separated. She'll be raising this baby as a single mother, and we're so proud of how strong she's being. 47 people turned to look at me. I hadn't told a single one of them. But what my mother didn't know, what neither of my parents had any idea about, was that my OB, Dr. Simone Okafor, was sitting 4 seats to my left. And inside her bag was a document my parents had never seen coming. Before I tell you what happened next, please like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time is it there. I love hearing from all of you. Now let me take you back to where this really began. I grew up in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, in a house that ran on one unspoken rule. My older sister Vanessa came first. Always. In every room, every conversation, every decision. My parents, Dad, who managed a mid-sized trucking company, and Mom, who worked part-time at a dental office and spent the rest of her time managing our family's social image, operated as though Vanessa's needs were weather and mine were background noise. Vanessa was 4 years older, louder, more charming, and she had learned early how to make a room turn toward her. I had learned early to wait until the room cleared. The pattern showed up so regularly I almost stopped seeing it. When I was 11, I won a regional spelling bee. It was a Friday afternoon. I came home with a small trophy and a certificate. Mom was on the phone with Vanessa's travel soccer coach, rescheduling a Saturday practice. She covered the receiver and mouthed, "That's great, honey." The trophy sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days before she moved it to the garage shelf to make room for a fruit bowl. At 16, I got my first real short story published in our county's arts journal. I'd been working on it for 4 months. Dad read the first paragraph, said, "Good for you," and went back to watching Vanessa's volleyball game tape. That same month, Vanessa got her driver's license on the second try. They threw a dinner at her favorite steakhouse, invited 12 people, and had a custom cake made. I sat there and told myself it was a bigger milestone. That driving mattered more than writing. That I was just more independent by nature, and that was fine. I told myself a lot of things for a very long time. The one that still stays with me is from when I was 23. I had been accepted into a social work graduate program at Ohio State, full tuition covered by a merit scholarship. It was the thing I had worked toward for 2 years. I called my parents from my apartment. My mother said, "Oh, wonderful. Hey, while I have you, Vanessa is having some trouble with her landlord, and I think you should help her draft a letter. You're good with words." We spent the next 40 minutes on Vanessa's lease dispute. My scholarship was never mentioned again. I finished the program on my own. 2.5 years later, I had my MSW and a position as a clinical social worker at a children's hospital in Columbus. I was proud of it. I built it myself. At 28, I met Daniel. He was a civil engineer, patient and dry-humored and deeply decent. We dated for a 1.5 years and got married in a small outdoor ceremony. My parents came. Vanessa was my maid of honor because my mother had suggested it before I'd had a chance to ask anyone, and I hadn't had the energy to argue about it that particular week. For 2 years, our marriage was good. Then it was hard. Then it was something we both tried to fix and couldn't quite reach. Daniel and I separated in January. We were 8 weeks along when we made that decision. Sitting across from each other at our kitchen table, both of us exhausted and sad and trying to be decent to each other in the middle of something very painful. We agreed on a co-parenting plan before we agreed on much else. We agreed on one other thing, too. We would tell people when we were ready. Together or separately, but on our own terms, when we had processed enough to be able to say it out loud without falling apart. I told my parents in February, just them, in their living room. I was composed. I explained it as clearly as I could. My mother cried, not for me, I noticed, but in that particular way that meant she was already thinking about how to tell other people. My father said, "Well, these things happen," and then asked if I'd talk to a lawyer. I said I needed them to keep it private while I figured out how to tell our wider circle. My mother nodded, said, "Of course, I should have known better." March brought the baby shower, planned by my mother and two of my close friends. Mom had inserted herself into the planning 4 months earlier with enough enthusiasm that my friends eventually let her take the lead, which I had mild reservations about but swallowed because I was tired and 31 weeks pregnant and choosing my battles. The venue was a garden room at a local restaurant, yellow and white decorations, a diaper cake in the corner, an ultrasound photo blown up on foam board, champagne for the guests, sparkling cider for me. My coworkers, my college friends, Daniel's mother and two sisters, my aunt on my father's side, neighbors who had known me since childhood. 47 people who had come to celebrate this baby. Dr. Simone Okafor was there because she had become something more than my doctor over the previous 7 months. She was warm and direct, and had, at my 20-week appointment, noticed something in my face that had nothing to do with the ultrasound. She had sat down, closed the folder, and said, "Talk to me." I had told her everything. The separation, my parents, the way I was holding all of it together with what felt like Scotch tape and sheer stubbornness. She had listened. Then she had said, "You're not alone in that room as much as it feels like you are." She had been a fixed point ever since. I had invited her to the shower on an impulse, and she had accepted on the same impulse, and we had both understood without saying it that her being there was not entirely incidental. 3 weeks before the shower, something happened that shifted my understanding of what my mother was capable of. I was at Vanessa's apartment for a Sunday dinner, one of the obligatory monthly gatherings my mother organized, the ones that always somehow centered on Vanessa's latest development, her new job title, her renovation plans, her feelings about various things. I stepped into the hallway to take a work call, and I heard my mother and Vanessa talking in the kitchen. "Does Rachel know you told the book club?" Vanessa said. "She'll understand eventually," Mom said. "People were going to find out anyway. It's better they hear it properly." I stood in that hallway for a long moment. She had already told her book club. 8 women who knew me, who had watched me grow up, who would be at the shower. I walked back into the kitchen and said nothing. I smiled through the rest of dinner. I drove home and sat in my car in my apartment complex parking lot and felt something harden in me that I had not expected. Not anger, I was past sharp anger by then. Something more like a decision that hadn't fully formed yet but was getting close. I called Dr. Okafor the next morning. "I need to ask you something," I said. "It might be a strange ask." "Try me," she said. I explained what I'd overheard. I explained what I knew was going to happen at the shower. My mother would say something, she wouldn't be able to help herself, and it would happen in a room full of people who loved me, and I would be sitting there 32 weeks pregnant with no warning and nowhere to go. "I've been carrying a document in my bag for 2 weeks," Dr. Okafor said. "Since your last appointment, actually. I wasn't sure you'd be ready for it. I think you might be." At my 28-week appointment, Dr. Okafor had referred me, quietly, without fanfare, to a family therapist she trusted, a woman who specialized in estrangement and boundary work. I had gone 3 times. In our second session, the therapist had helped me write something. Not a confrontation speech, not a list of grievances, something more precise than that. A statement of intent. It was 2 pages. It outlined, clearly and without cruelty, the specific ways my parents had communicated my separation to others without my consent, the impact that had on my ability to navigate a private and painful time, and what I was choosing to do about it going forward. It was clinical in places and personal in others. It said, plainly, that I was limiting contact until certain things changed. It listed what those things were. It was the most honest document I had ever put my name to. Dr. Okafor had a copy in her bag. I told her what I suspected would happen at the shower. I told her I did not want to cause a scene, but I was done letting scenes happen to me. She said, "If the moment comes, I'll be ready. You just focus on that baby." The morning of the shower, I felt calm in a way that surprised me. Not numb, genuinely calm. I had made the decision weeks ago. The shower was just the occasion. I arrived. The room was beautiful. My friends hugged me. People oohed over the decorations and took pictures of the diaper cake and signed the little cards in the memory book. For 40 minutes, it was exactly what it was supposed to be. A group of people who loved me, gathering around something good that was coming. Then my mother stood up. She clinked the glass. She said it. 47 people turned and looked at me. I watched the faces, the confusion, the sympathy, the particular discomfort of people who have been handed private information in a public setting and don't know what to do with it. Daniel's mother, Patricia, sat very still across the room with her hands folded in her lap and an expression I can only describe as carefully contained fury. My college friend B, who had been my closest friend since freshman year and who had not been told, looked at me with her eyes wide and said nothing, waiting. My mother was still talking. Something about strength and resilience and the village it takes to raise a child. She was performing it. That's the only word that fits. My father sat beside her and looked at the tablecloth. I did not cry. I looked across the room at Dr. Okafor. She was already reaching into her bag. She stood up, and the room pivoted toward her because she is the kind of person a room pivots toward. Composed, deliberate, taking up exactly as much space as she needs, and no more. She smiled at my mother in the way that means nothing is actually funny. "I'm Rachel's OB," she said to the room. "And I've also had the privilege of knowing her as a person over these past months. I want to say something, with Rachel's permission, before we move on to the rest of this celebration." She looked at me. I nodded. "What you just heard announced is something Rachel asked to share on her own terms, in her own time. That opportunity was taken from her just now, in front of all of you, and I want to name that clearly so we don't pretend it didn't happen." She paused. "Rachel has something she'd like you all to have." She walked across the room and handed me the document. I had made 47 copies. I had brought them in an envelope in my own bag because I had known the way you know when you have watched someone's patterns long enough to read them in advance. I had prepared. Not out of anger. Out of the quiet, certain knowledge that I was done being unprepared for the things my parents were going to do. I passed the copies around the room. It took a few minutes. People read quietly. Some read slowly. Some finished in 30 seconds and looked up. My mother had gone very still. My father's copy sat on the table in front of him, unread, his hands flat on either side of it. When the room had had a moment, I spoke. "I wrote this 3 weeks ago," I said. "I'm sharing it today because what just happened is part of a longer pattern, and I'm no longer interested in managing that pattern quietly while everyone around me is kept comfortable. You all deserve to know the truth about what has been going on. Not the version my mother tells, the actual version." I looked at her. "You told your book club about my separation in February without my permission. You told Vanessa to be careful not to let it slip that you'd already told people. You planned this shower and used it as the occasion to make this announcement because you knew I couldn't walk out. You've done versions of this my entire life, taken my milestones and made them yours to distribute." My mother opened her mouth. "I was trying to help you, Rachel. You were carrying this alone and I thought—" "No," I said, not loudly, just clearly. "You thought about how it would feel to be the one with the information. That's what you thought about." She closed her mouth. Patricia, Daniel's mother, said from across the room, "I didn't know you'd told anyone. We hadn't told anyone." Her voice was steady and pointed. "We were waiting for Rachel." My aunt, my father's sister Carol, put her copy of the document face down on the table and said to my mother, "Margaret, this was not yours to say." My mother looked around the room for an ally and found very few faces offering her one. B was looking at the document. The book club women, 3 of whom were present, were looking at each other, and at least 2 of them seemed to understand for the first time that what they'd been told in someone's living room over tea had not been given freely by the person it belonged to. My father picked up his copy. He read it slowly. All of it. When he finished, he set it down and looked at the table for a long moment, and then he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Rachel." 2 words. Not a speech, not an explanation. Just that. I nodded. "I know, Dad." My mother gathered her things and left 40 minutes before the shower ended. She did not open the presents with me. She did not see the tiny yellow sleeper that Patricia had wrapped in tissue paper, or the handmade quilt from B, or the little stuffed rabbit my aunt had found at a market in Vermont. Those 40 minutes, with the people who stayed, were the best 40 minutes of the entire day. Dr. Okafor sat beside me while I opened gifts. She didn't say very much. She handed me things when I couldn't reach, and she laughed when the diaper cake turned out to be structurally unsound and collapsed sideways when we tried to move it. And she said quietly at one point, "You did good, Rachel. You really did." My daughter Nora was born 6 weeks later. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She has dark hair and enormous eyes, and when she's sleeping she makes a small sound that I can only describe as satisfied, like she has decided the world is acceptable. Daniel was in the delivery room. We are not together, but we are good. We are better as co-parents than we were as a couple, which is something I could not have predicted and have come to understand as its own kind of gift. He texts me pictures of her face when she does something new. I send him videos of her first sounds. We are building a different kind of family than the one we planned, and it is smaller and quieter and more honest than what came before. My mother called 3 weeks after Nora was born. She did not apologize over the phone. She asked if she could come to visit. I said yes, with conditions. I told her what they were. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "All right." She came. She held Nora for an hour. She was careful with me in a way she had never been before. Tentative, almost. Checking rather than assuming. It is not the relationship I once wanted. I am not sure what it will become. But it is at least real now, which is more than it ever was when it was comfortable. Vanessa and I have spoken twice since the shower. Both conversations were brief. I think she is waiting for me to return to who I used to be. The one who absorbed things quietly, who smoothed things over, who made space for other people's comfort at the cost of her own. That person is not coming back. I'm not angry at Vanessa. I just don't have the energy to manage her expectations anymore. And I've realized that's not cruelty. It's just honesty about what I have to give. My father sends Nora a card every week. He writes something in it each time. Small things, something he saw on a walk, a joke he read, something he remembers about when I was little that he thinks she might like knowing someday. It is the most consistently he has ever shown up for me. I think he is trying in the way people try when they have finally understood what they were doing and find the only available path forward is to do differently. I am watching it happen, and I am not rushing it, in either direction. I think about the shower sometimes, not with bitterness, but with something like wonder. That I sat in that room at 32 weeks pregnant and did the one thing I had been too tired or too careful to do my whole life. I said what was true. I let the room hold it. If you are someone who has learned to manage other people's behavior in silence, who has absorbed and adjusted and stayed small to keep the peace, I want you to hear this. The peace you are keeping is not yours. It belongs to the people who benefit from your silence. Your own peace is still waiting for you, and it looks completely different. You are allowed to prepare. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to walk into a room that has been set up against you and change what happens in it. You don't have to wait until you have nothing left. You just have to decide that what you have is worth protecting. Nora is 4 months old now. She is currently asleep in the next room. I can hear her on the monitor, that small, satisfied sound. I have never felt less alone. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone take a moment from you that was yours to share? What did you do, or what do you wish you had done? I read every single comment. Drop yours below. Until next time, you are the author of your own story. Don't let anyone else pick up the pen.